wide between all the pieces. Say what? Between all the pieces.
Look here. Ooh. God, it's a boiler! Boiler!
The boiler for me was the signature image that told us we'd found the Titanic.
Get out, Kathy got the champagne?
I'm old, I'm puzzled, and I'm only able to change one of those. I've always had a fascination with the sinking of the Titanic back in 1912 and the discovery of the wreck back in 1985. As a kid, I remember reading the book A Night to Remember by Walter Lord and watching the movie that was based on it. I even tried to figure out how to become a member of the Titanic Historical Society, but that was pre-internet, and trying to find that sort of information was a lot more difficult than it is today. As a teenager, I read the adventure novel Raise the Titanic by Clive Cussler and loved it. Years later, I met him at a book signing and got him to autograph my copy of the book. I was fascinated to see the images of the wreck from the news reports back in 1985. My interest was rekindled back in 1997 when the movie Titanic came out and all the hype surrounding it. The newspaper in the city where I lived at the time, Stratford, Ontario, published an article about a local man who died on the Titanic and is buried in the next town over. He was first-class passenger George Edward Graham. It piqued my interest because I was very into genealogy at the time, and as we shared the same last name, I wondered if we might be related. I did some investigation and couldn't find any connection. As I do the time lapse of this puzzle, I'm going to read you the Encyclopedia Titanica entry for George Graham. The music in the background is the Song d'Automne, or Autumn Dream, by Archibald Joyce. Some Titanic experts believe that this is the song that the band actually played in the last moments before the Titanic sunk. So let's do this. Mr. George Edward Graham was born 11th of June, 1873 on a farm near St. Mary's, Ontario. He was the sixth of 7 brothers and at 17 went to work as a clerk at a hardware store. He worked as a salesman in Galt, then moved to Toronto in 1903 where he joined the Canadian department store chain Eaton's. He married Elizabeth May Jackson from Harriston in 1905 and they were active members in the Methodist Church. 2 of Graham's brothers were Methodist ministers. When Eaton's opened a store in Winnipeg in 1906, Graham was transferred to Manitoba to head the crockery and fine china division. In 1908, the Grahams had a son, John Humphrey, but he died in January 1911 and was buried in St. Mary's Cemetery. Shortly after his death, Edith suffered a miscarriage. Graham was reluctant to leave his wife alone, but he was dispatched on a buying trip to England, Belgium, and Austria. He boarded the Titanic at Southampton as a first-class passenger, ticket number 112053, 30 pounds, occupying cabin B42. He was with a group of traveling salesmen who dined together and who autographed a menu as a souvenir. While he was abroad, Graham's wife went to visit her parents in Harriston, and upon her husband's return was to meet him at her brother-in-law's house at 240 Dufferin Street in Toronto. At 6 p.m. on the night of the sinking, Graham dropped by the wireless room of the Titanic and sent his wife a Marconigram, quote, "New York Wednesday morning, wire me Sandy Hook, well," unquote. At the time, Mrs. Graham was on a train bound for Toronto, and when she arrived Tuesday morning to hear the news of the sinking, she was relieved to get the telegram. She, of course, had no way of knowing it was sent before the ship went down. On April 18th, the St. Mary's Journal reported Graham's name as thought to be among the list of those saved. Quote, "But the uncertainty is caused the greatest anxiety to his relatives here, and the great concern is felt by the whole community. The Eaton Company which has sent a man to New York to get particulars, reported Tuesday that George's name was on the White Star Company's list of saved passengers. It is earnestly thought that this report will be confirmed, unquote. Edith was about to leave for New York to meet her husband when she was officially informed he was lost in the sinking. His body was recovered by the McKay Bennett. He was identified as number 147. Number 147, male, estimated age 45. Clothing, black overcoat, blue serge suit. Effects, memo book, check for $300. Pocketbook, credit book of T. Eaton and Company. Silver pencil case, fountain pen, pencil case, keys, gold watch, fob, and locket. 7 shillings and 3 pence, $105. 2 pocket knives. 1 gold collar button. Name, George E. Graham, 91 Dundurn Place. There were 2 funerals for Mr. Graham, one at the Broadway Tabernacle in Toronto and another in Harriston. The St. Mary's Journal of 7 May 1912 carried the following story. Laid at rest. Funeral of the late George E. Graham. One of the largest funerals ever witnessed in Harriston was held over Saturday upon the arrival of a special train from Toronto, bringing the remains of Mr. George Graham. The train was made up of 5 coaches, including the Etonia, the private car of the company president, Mr. J.C. Eaton. It arrived at the CPR depot at 11 a.m. and from which the remains were conveyed to the Methodist Church, where services were conducted, after which the remains were taken to the Harriston Cemetery. The floral tributes were beautiful and required special conveyances. All businesses in the town were suspended and the town flag was at half-mast. Edith Graham never remarried, and when she died in January 31st, 1960, she wished to be buried beside her infant son in St. Mary's Cemetery. At the same time, the Graham family had George's body exhumed from the cemetery in Harriston, and it was reinterred with his wife in St. Mary's. While I was working on the Jigsaw puzzle, I listened to the book Into the Deep by Dr. Robert Ballard, the man who actually discovered the Titanic. And in it, he tells an amazing story of how the discovery of the Titanic was actually part of a secret naval investigation into 2 sunk submarines. I highly recommend the book. And so, this video is dedicated to all those people that were lost on April 15th, 1912, including George Graham. So thanks for watching the video. Also in the comments is a link to my Buy Me a Coffee page if you'd like to support this channel. And subscribe to this channel to see what other nonsense I can get up to. Because, you know, I'm old, I'm bored, and I'm only able to change one of those.